Okay, this is a two-part assignment. This first one is pretty quick, okay? You have 8 to the negative third power. Here's what you do about this with a negative exponent. If you just use the caret button, you get a decimal. I don't want you to put that, okay? I want you to write it as a fraction. Here's what you do. That decimal you just got, I want as a fraction. You're like, well, how the heck would I write that as a fraction? Well, it's pretty easy. You put a 1 over the top with a fraction, and that allows you now to make your exponent positive. So I have 1 over, and I take 8 times 8 times 8. It's 512. What I just did is a process called reciprocating. Reciprocating. Okay, 5 to the negative second. If I put a 1 over, then I can just think of it as 5 to the positive second, which is 25. Now I can think of that as 4 to the positive third, which is 64. Now let's talk about a 0 power. Let's take 5 to the 0 power. I got 1. Now, let's say that was 80 to the 0 power. I got 1. Let's say that was 500,000 to the 0 power. I got 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1, okay? Negative power, I would love to think of that as 3 to the second, which I can if I put a 1. It's going to be 1/9. Now 6 to the first is 6, so that'd be 1/6. Now when you do this, if the base is negative, you can't make that positive, okay? That stays negative. It's the power, just the power. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Got to be positive because when I have a negative base with an even power, it's positive. Okay. 6 to the third, 260. Okay, pause the video and do the back side of this, and then I'll teach you how to do the packet part of it. Okay, now starting on this assignment, to simplify these more complicated expressions, what I want you to do is make 3 lines, okay? Okay, now look on top, ignore the powers, you have a base of x. And it's just to the 4th, no parentheses. On bottom you have a base x, negative 6. Now we have an x on top and on bottom. So I need to cross one of them out. Let's cross out the smaller one. Now you're like, you subtract negative 6. But since that was a negative, you're actually going to do the opposite of subtract, which is add 6. Okay? 4 minus negative 6, which is the same as 4 plus 6. Okay? And that gives me a 10. Okay? Now, here's what the middle line is for. If you have a negative exponent, which we don't, okay, but if that was a negative exponent, you would have to move that to the other side of your fraction where it could become a positive. But since that's positive, we leave it where it's at. We can't evaluate it. It's x to the power of 10. So remember, on this, when I cross out a negative power, I actually go up to the top and add, okay, 4 plus 6. Okay, next problem. Now, my fraction is here, underline the whole thing, and on top you have a 10, x, and y. You don't have anything on bottom yet, okay? So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Now you don't have anything on the bottom, so you can't cross anything out. Now we move to here. Any negative exponent means I have to move the base to the other side of the fraction so that the power can be rewritten as a positive. Same with the letters. Now, if everything's on the bottom, you need something on top. Put a 1, okay? So now that's 1. 10 to the second is evaluated. That's 100 times x to the second times y to the second, okay? All right, so underline the expressions. There's not a fraction there. You kind of make one of your own, and then you go to town here. So on top, ignoring the powers, we have two a's, so I write a down once because I'm going to add powers, and then b. So the a, okay, we take 4 plus negative 6, or 4 plus negative 10, excuse me. That would be negative 6. And then with the b's, we take negative 3 plus 6, and that's 3. Now, I don't have anything on bottom, so I can't cross out anything. Now, the middle line, if I see a negative power, I move the base onto the other side so it can be rewritten as a positive exponent. Now, this was a positive, so I don't move it. It stays on that side of the fraction, okay? And I cannot evaluate b to the third. I cannot evaluate a to the sixth, okay? That's the answer. Okay, I don't need to make the fractions there. So ignoring that negative third power, you have a 2 times an x here. And on bottom, ignoring the power, you have a y. Now, what are the powers? You have a 1, but it's not in parentheses, so we can just use a 1, okay? We don't multiply it if there's no parentheses. And x, negative third, no parentheses, and then y, negative fourth. You can't cross out anything because there's nothing on top, on bottom. So now the middle line, that is a positive power, so we keep that on that side. This has a negative power, so I would move it down to the other side of the line so I can rewrite it as a positive 3. Now, we have a negative power here. So to make it a positive power, I need to move it to the other side of the line. So it's going to go on top, and it's to the fourth, okay? This step here, this middle part, is for making sure I only have positive powers, okay? 2 to the first is 2 times y to the fourth, and then x to the third, okay? Okay, keep on going here. You're fine, you're fine. Okay, underline the expression. On top, you have a 7, an x, and a y. Ignore the powers, and you're not going to have anything on bottom yet. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. X, I take negative 3 times negative 2, and that's 6. And then y, I take 1 times negative 2, that's negative 2. You can't cross out anything because you don't have any bottoms to cross out with. So now I see a negative power with the 7, so I need to move the 7 to the other side of the fraction so that the negative power can be rewritten as a positive. I don't move the x because it already has a positive power, so I keep it where it's at. Okay, and then that one, the y would have to move to the other side, so it goes to a positive 2. So you got x to the sixth. 7 to the second is 7 times 7, that would be 49, times y to the second. Okay, next one, underline the expression. And ignoring all the little powers, you have a 7 and 8. For letters, you have 2 x's, but we'll just write down an x because I have a way to add the powers, and then the y. Nothing on bottom. So 7. 1 times 2 would be 2. 8 is to the first, but I don't multiply it because it's not in parentheses, so I just use the first power. X, now there's 2 x's, so we're going to add their powers together. Now the first power comes from here, but I got to take negative 2 times 2, which is negative 4. Then the other one is to the 2. So negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Now, about the y. This is a y. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Okay, circle the ones with negative powers. The ones without, we keep where they're at, okay? The ones with negatives, now they go below, so we can write their powers as positives, 2 and 6. So the last part, I evaluate what I can. 7 times 7 is 49. And 8 to the first is 8, and then these cannot be evaluated. Now, I think you could be able to multiply 49 by 8 now. And that gives me 392. Okay, next problem. Okay, remember it's all 1, so look on top first, ignore the powers. You have a 2, you have an m, you got 2 of them, but we'll just write 1 of them for now, and then an n. Now let's talk about the 2. We'll do the bottom after we finish the top. So 1 times 3 is 3. Now m, I see 2 of them, so I'll start on the left. 1 times 3 is 3. Then I have to add the negative 8, okay? So 3 plus negative 8 is negative 5, okay? Now let's talk about the n. It's to the first. 1 times 3 is 3, okay? Now on bottom, ignore the powers. You don't have any numerical bases. You just have m and n. So m times n. Remember, I'll add the powers on the n. So m, you got just negative 3. Now that's not in the parentheses. The parentheses is just around the top, so I write down negative 3. And with the n's, okay, there's 2 of them, but we have a way to combine them by adding the powers. We would take 6 plus 6, which is 12. So this is what I have. Now, you can cross out some things to simplify it, okay? What is smaller on m, negative 3 or negative 5? Well, I think it's negative 5. So you can get rid of it there. And normally I subtract, but if it was a negative, I'm going to add 5. I'm going to do the opposite, okay? And that is 2, m to the 2, okay? M to the second. Now 3 and 9, 3 is a smaller one. That was positive, so we subtract 3, and that gives me 9. N is to the 9th power, okay? Can't really see it, m to the second, n to the 9th. So this is what I have, 2 to the 3rd, m to the 2nd, n to the 9th. You don't have any negative powers, okay? They're all positives. So we don't move anything. We keep the 2 to the 3rd on the side it's already on. We keep the m to the 2nd on the side it's on. And we keep the n to the 9th where it's at. You only move it to the other side if it's a negative power. 2 to the 3rd, that would be 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And I got m second times n to the 9th. All right, now, next part. Okay, now on top, ignore the little powers. You got 5 twice, but we have a way to add. X twice, we have a way to add, and then y. You don't have anything on bottom, so let's talk about the 5s. There's 2 of them, so that's an adding. So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. On this 5, 1 times 2 would be 2. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, okay? X, you got 2 of those as well on top, so we can combine them by adding. So negative 4 times negative 2 is 8. 1 times 2 is 2. So 8 plus 2 is 10. Okay, y. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Plus 1 times 2 is 2. It would give me negative 4. So 0, 10, and negative 4. So this one with the negative has to go down to the other side so I can write it as a positive 4. These would stay in the same place. 5 to the 0 times x to the 10th. Now you can evaluate 5 to the 0. Remember from that first sheet, anything to the 0 is 1. So 1 times x to the 10th, y to the 4th. Okay, I'm going to do several more here. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. So top, you got m. Bottom, you got, so negative 8. Bottom, you got m, negative 6. What's smaller, negative 8 or negative 6? You cross out negative 8, and you would subtract negative 8, but that's the same as adding 8. Okay, when you cross out a negative, then it's plus on the other side. Okay, because that's 2. Now, so we got m to the second. It's positive, so we keep it there, but I need something on top. I put a 1, and I can't evaluate. It's 1 over m to the second. Okay, here you got 5 times x times y on top. Nothing on bottom yet. These are all to the 1, but they all have to be times by negative 4. We got 3 negative powers, so we have to move all their bases to the bottom so we can write them in positive exponent form. 1 on top. Now you can evaluate 5 to the 4th. 625. Okay, next up. Okay, so on top, ignore the numbers. You got x. You don't have any numerical bases. You have variable bases. You write x. Remember, we were going to add the powers. And y will add the powers there. So x's. It'll be no parentheses, so I don't have to multiply. Just add 5 plus negative 9. Gives me negative 4. Y's, you got negative 6 plus 8. Gives me 2. Okay, now the negative power, that x moves to the other side, so I can rewrite it as 4. Then the y to the second. Okay, and those stay the same. Because you can't simplify those. Top, what do you got going on? You got a numerical base of 5 and a variable base m. So you got 1. You don't multiply because that's not in parentheses. It's 1 and negative 4. Okay. And then on bottom you have an n. Okay. Negative 6. Don't have to multiply because there's no parentheses. Can't cross anything out. Okay. You have something on bottom, but there's not an n on top to go with it, so you can't cross out. To cross out, they have to be of the same base. Okay, now look at your positives. This one here, you just carry the 5 to the first. Now the m goes to the bottom, so I can write that as a positive 4. Now I take the n up to the top, so I can rewrite that as a 6. So 5 to the first is 5 times n to the 6th. Bottom's m to the 4th. Okay, next up. Okay, on top you got a base 4, a base A, and a base B. Okay, so 4, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And we don't have anything on bottom, okay, yet. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. In that parentheses, you got to multiply by the outside power before you write it here. B, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. I'll circle, and you can't cross anything out, so I circle the negatives. Both the 4 and the B, the A stays where it is, but the 4 and the B come to the bottom, so I can rewrite them as positive powers, 2 and 2. So A to the 4th, 4 to the second would be 16 times B to the second. Okay, underline the expression. And on top, we got a 5 and a 7 as my numerical bases. Variables, you got x's, there's 2 of them, but just write 1 of them, and then y. On bottom, nothing, okay? Don't write an x twice on top or a y twice on top. Now, if you have an x on top and bottom, you'll write it. You'll eventually cross it off, but yeah. So 5, 1 times negative 2, negative 2. 7's to the first, you don't multiply that because it's not in the parentheses, just 1. X's, there's 2 of them, so that means an addition is in order. Negative 3 times negative 2 is 6, and then 3. 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay, now my y, this is y. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Okay, circle where you have the negative powers. The ones with the positives stay where they're at. Ones with the negatives, we transfer them to the bottom. And that becomes a 2, that becomes a 4. So 7 to the first is 7 times x to the ninth. 5 to the second, that'd be 5 times 5, that's 25 times y to the fourth. Okay, next one, extend that line. So on top, what do you got? You got a 7. That's it for the number bases. For variables, you have 2x, that's on x, by the way. Okay, you have 2 x's, but again, we just write it down once because we'll add the powers and then times y. Now let's go downstairs. Ignore the exponents. You don't have any number bases. You have an x and a y. Okay, 7, 1. 1 times 2 is 2. X, remember there's 2 of them on top, so we'll have to add, okay? So 1 times 2 is 2, and then you got negative 8. 2 plus negative 8 would be negative 6. So that x is to the negative 6 on top. Now the y, you just got this here. 1 times 2 is 2. Now we travel to the bottom. X, you got a negative 3. Let's talk about our y's. We have 2 of them, so we would want to add the powers because I'd be multiplying on bottom. Negative 6 plus 3. That would be negative 3. So now you got 7 second, x negative 6, y 2, x negative 3, y negative 3. Now you can cross out some things here, okay? You really can. X, what's smaller, negative 6 or negative 3, okay? Negative 6 is smaller. What's the opposite of negative 6? It'd be plus 6, okay? So negative 3 plus 6 would be 3, okay? 2 and negative 3, what's smaller? Well, negative 3 is. What's the opposite of negative 3? It'd be plus 3. If it was just a 3, I'd minus 3. And that's 5. So you have 7 second, y fifth, x third after all that mess. None of the exponents are negative, so they all stay in the same place. There'd be no reason to move them. That's an x to the third. 7 to the second be 49. Y to the fifth, x to the third. So again, you're going to cross out the smaller one, and then the operation uses the opposite. So if you cross out a negative, you're going to plus. If you cross out a positive, you're going to minus. Okay. All right, then the last one, just a top to begin with. You have a 2 and a 5. Ignore the powers for a second. We'll deal with those later. And then you got x and y. Don't write 2 of the same letter. Don't write 2 of the same base twice on top. Now, if it's on bottom, you'll write it again, but not on top. Okay, 2. This is only 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 5. This is only 5. 1 times 2 is 2. Now the x's, you have 2 of them on this side, so you're going to add. So negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, and 3 times 2 is 6. So negative 4 plus 6 is 2. Okay? Now with the y's.
Are you going to be using the teacher's lock?
Yeah, I'll lock it up. Okay, all right. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 times 2 is 2, so it's 8. All these are positive, okay? So we don't move anything. It all stays in the same spot. Okay, and then evaluate what you can. 2 to the second is 4. 5 to the second is 25. Times x to the second times y to the eighth. Now at the end, you got to remember, you could multiply 4 by 25. That's 100. Okay. So again, make a long story short, first thing, you write your bases top, write your bases bottom, figure out the exponents, and then cross out if you have the same base on top as on bottom. Okay, that's simplifying it. Second part's for reciprocation. That means if you have a negative power, you need to move it to the other side of the fraction so it can be a positive. And step 3 is for evaluation of the exponents where possible. You can't evaluate the variables, but the letters there.